In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Need a holiday gift that will keep her sparkling all year long? Right now, Blue Nile, the original online jeweler, is offering 30% off select jewelry. With experts on hand 24/7 to provide guidance, you're sure to find the perfect piece. And now there's even more to love about shopping at BlueNile.com. For a limited time, get 36-month special financing on minimum purchases of $1,000. Restrictions apply. See BlueNile.com for details. That's BlueNile.com.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Juve plus Valencia, Napoli's being done with Osimhen. So I honestly, I feel like everyone's going to end up in jail at the end of this season. Hello and welcome to another special episode of the Serie A Chronicles podcast with me, Mina Rzouki, and as ever, I am joined by the wonderful Nicky Bandini. Now, Nicky, last week I had called you the light and I am the darkness, and it seems to have really tickled a lot of people listening. I'm looking at you, Laura. But I am the witch of Serie A, and I think that that's why we have such a yin and yang energy, right?
It's lies. She's lovely. She lies. She pretends to be awful. But I'm extra excited this week because Mina, in fact, has magicked up from her witch's cauldron a fantastic interview for us this week. Gianluca Busio of Venezia is going to be joining us. So I'm very, very excited for that.
Oh, I am very excited for that too, Nicky. I feel like when it comes to these things, we just have so many questions to ask that I don't even know sometimes how to ever conduct these interviews in a normal, timely fashion. I'm like, and and then it's like until they hang up on me, and I'm like, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's normal. That's the life of a journalist doing any interviews. You're always like, how far can I push this? How long can I go until someone physically stops me? And sometimes you're surprised. Sometimes they actually really are enjoying the chat with you and they don't want to stop, and you get away with a lot. And sometimes you can see they're trying to get out of there as quick as they can. So I'm sure Gianluca will want to give us lots of time, but we'll find out soon, I'm sure.
There was some great matches this week. I mean, so great. I had my heart, my head in my hands really most of the time because there was Venezia Verona, there was Sassuolo's game, and now I forgot who at the top of my head, honestly, but it was just because I had decided to place a lot of bets this weekend because I just felt like it, thought it was going to be a fun time. And I had put 3-0 on into winning 2-0 against Roma, and it came true.
Did you bet on 2-0 or 3-0? Because if it's 2-0, I've got some bad news. Oh, wow. Congratulations. That's a good bet. Wow. And
I just thought, it's money in the bin. I know that. But I just thought it's worth a tenner, and that came through. So, yeah, that was a little fun.
If we weren't doing all this digitally because it's 2021 and that's how it works, I would be saying coffee's on Mina, but apparently not. You'll just have to owe it for next time.
There should definitely be dinner at this point, but yes. But let's start. I'll tell you guys something, Nicky's the sweetest person, but when she loves something, she starts to swear. And she swore when we started talking about Napoli, Atalanta. She was it was so effing good.
Yeah, I don't know if I should repeat it. Otherwise, we might get in trouble with the, I think you have to put an explicit censored thing on your podcast if you use those words. I shouldn't.
But yeah, it was that good of a game. Let's start there. This is, by the way, can I just note something? A lot of us came into this season, and it wasn't just you and I, but a lot of people who follow the league closely, a lot of journalists, a lot of pundits had worried a little bit about Atalanta this season. Were they going to be able to keep up with what they've managed over the last few seasons under Gasperini? There has been obviously the loss of Papu Gomez. Ilicic is someone they depended on, but not always dependable, They had lost, obviously, Golini and Romero to Tottenham Hotspurs, large transfers away. Was it going to work with everything that they had changed? And yet this is their best ever start to a Serie A season. Gasperini is totally, I wouldn't want to say kicking butts all over the place. And they arrive at Napoli and deliver the most delicious spectacle ever until everyone started applauding them at the end. What a lovely stadium the Diego Maradona Stadium is.
Look, there are people I know who've had some pretty bad experiences around that stadium as well. So, of course, with every football stadium, there's good and bad. But it was certainly a wonderful, wonderful thing what happened on Sunday night. Because I think what you had was two football teams who, look, I'm not necessarily going to tell you that this was the best technical football you'll ever see in your life, though some of it was very, very good. I'm sure that there is space within what happened on Sunday for someone to be a grump about it and say, well, if you came here and played sensible football, if you came here and didn't play in such an open way, you could have avoided some of these goals. You could have actually manipulated them. I don't care.
Is that someone Allegri?
Because what happened was Luciano Spalletti, who was out basically half his starting 11 at this point, no Victor Osimhen, no Anguissa, no Fabian Ruiz, no Lorenzo Insigne. I'm missing someone else off that list as well. He's literally missing half the starting 11. Koulibaly, of course, and that's a really important one, actually, given what happens. Could say exactly what Jose Mourinho says later on, by the way, and we'll get to that. Don't worry, Mourinho, opinion holders, because we're going to get to Jose and say, oh, I've got nothing left. Oh, woe is me. And he didn't. He said, all right, then I'm going to come up with a 3-4-3 that's sort of trying to mirror Atalanta's. And we're going to say, Atalanta want to play all in these one-on-ones. They trust their players. They empower them. They say, you can win the one-on-ones, and that's how we're going to attack teams. We're going to press high. And Spalletti said, we're just going to do the same, and we're going to try and do it better than them. And look, in the end, it didn't work, right? Because they lost. But my God, it made for a fun 90 minutes of football.
Really did.
I really, really enjoyed this game. I enjoyed it too much.
Yeah, it was one of those games where you're like, oh, it's so open. Like, if you like me and you're so used to watching defensive things, you're like, be careful, no, stop. And that was pretty much me watching this game, But you're right, it was so tremendous to watch. I love that they mirrored each other. I love that it was duels all over the pitch. I love that there was just so much ambition shown to score the goals. I mean, to hell with defense, right? And it was interesting, actually, because a lot of people had said that, they're losing Osterman, they're losing Anguissa, and then how much of the goals would be missing. But it doesn't matter because they had the best defensive record. But they don't anymore because their midfield. Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so much fun, is that they aren't really concentrating on the defensive, and they have lost key players, obviously, because Anguissa is that player that secures your defense. Your midfield and that line and the strength within it is what gives you the security at the back. And then missing Koulibaly as well makes the difference, right? And they changed everything. So going, at the back. So that obviously I understand that. But here's the thing, like, everyone was like, oh, look, why were we even worried about Napoli? Look at the way that they, handed Lazio their ass, basically, as in, it was just a case of, it was just such beautiful football. Obviously, Mertens scoring nonstop. And you just looked at Lazio so deflated, so incapable of even doing a single thing on that pitch. And Napoli won so easily and convincingly. And then I just have this thing about Napoli that I'm always a little bit scared about. And then they played Sassuolo. And it was rightly disallowed, that goal at the end for Defrel. And it finished all equal at 2-2. But frankly speaking, Napoli could have lost that game. And the one thing that scared me is, why wasn't Diego Demme introduced beforehand? I like it when they have more of a physical presence in midfield, because it's a lot of beauty in that game. But sometimes they are a little soft, Napoli. And you need your, I think it makes a difference, for example, when Lobotka was hurt and had to be taken off, because you need that kind of player for Napoli. And I feel like if they were going to invest in others, they need to keep bringing these guys in, So I looked at them against Sassuolo and thought they're going to get smashed against Atalanta, but they didn't. And I thought it was so impressive considering the fact that they lost so many of their players, that they don't have some of their stars, that they're obviously like much of their spine, like you had mentioned. And yet they put everything out there. They didn't make excuses for themselves. And I love the way that Spalletti talks, because that is what changes mentality. When you're always doing the woe is me, it annoys me so much. But I love that Spalletti saying, I don't care. We're not using that as an excuse. We're going to go and we're going to try to win this game, because that's what Atalanta do. They have played against Manchester United, against all the top clubs without some of their best players. And they do their best and always entertain. And Napoli is now that side.
Yeah, Atalanta is also still outside. My favorite moment of this game, without doubt, is Rafa Toloi, a centre-back, playing a beautiful down the right channel through ball for Mary Demiral, a centre-back who, for some reason, in the 60th minute or whatever it was, later than that, 70th minute, is literally charging into the Napoli box. You're thinking, how did you get there? I need to wind back the tape and find out how that happened. And it working, and Demiral scoring a brilliant goal, and having just been at fault, by the way, on the goal they conceded to Mertens. I loved, I'm just transitioning this conversation from Napoli. I completely agree with you about Spalletti. I love that mindset. But I'm transitioning it to Atalanta, who did, after all, win this game, because I think that what sort of made it so, the childlike beauty of it that comes out for me is Gasperini at the end of the game saying, this is the football I've had in my head, and Atalanta let me do it. Like, defenders attacking, everyone attacking. This is like, I can't remember his exact phrasing, but it was basically that, I've had this idea in my head of how football should be played. And over the last few years, basically, Atalanta has said, yeah, you can do that. And it turns out the ideas that he has in his head have been good enough to finish in the top four now repeatedly, have been good enough to make them a competitive side in the Champions League. We still don't know if they're going to get through to the knockout stage. They've got a tough last game. They've got to beat Villarreal, but still, it's very much on the cards, which, given their situation, their budget, is already impressive. And it's got them in a position where people are asking him sincerely whether or not this team can win the Scudetto. And look, I thought he had a good answer for that as well. He said, we can have this conversation when we've been top once, because we haven't been top at any point in the last few seasons. And do you know what? That's a good answer. But they're 4 points off first, Mina. They're 7 points off fifth. And that's a pretty impressive statement yet again for a team that I said before this season started, I thought just by the law of football physics was going to have to come back a little bit down sooner or later.
You're right. It's interesting as to, when he does talk about the Scudetto, he's so clear about what he thinks. And it's also, you believe him. Like, a lot of the times you think others are saying what they're saying because they're scared of, the evil eye, or they're scared to jinx anything, or they don't want to rush. But Gasperini always talks so bluntly. And the way that he keeps changing his squad, like Mera Demiral scoring that goal, and I just think to myself, I think it's fabulous that Juventus keep giving them these wonderful centre backs like Romero, now Demiral, and they all turn into these superstars when they're under Gasperini.
In 2 years, he can sell them to the Premier League for 40 million euros. And then that's,
Exactly, where, you may make no money. And then, anyway. And then if you are looking for this wonderful superstar that can play all these games, why don't you just make Gasperini your coach? You brought in Sarri, you brought in Pirlo. Maybe Gasperini should have been the man that you looked into. Since, you worked there before, maybe that would have been an idea. But it is amazing, because sometimes when I'm sitting there thinking, Napoli did so well against Atalanta. Listen to that again. Napoli did so well against Atalanta. It's almost like Atalanta for me are like the, Manchester United, or that old sort of cliche of what a big club is. That well done to Napoli for coping despite these injuries, And that's what sometimes I sort of, this is a team that's still without Gosens, that, Hateboer, I don't think is yet on the level that he usually is. And there's Papu Gomez, Illich. There's just so many differences from this team that was dominating, and they're even better. And part of me thinks, no, you should be beating Atalanta because all of us have so much more, like all the big clubs, Juventus, Inter, obviously Napoli, stuff, all have more money than Atalanta. And yet the way that they play their football makes you really think that it's amazing what these men will do for Gasperini. And it's amazing how every season they progress more and more as a team and more as individuals, because Zapata for me right now, stunning to watch.
He's unreal, isn't he? And we probably haven't talked about him enough. And I thought that he was so impressive all through the game, but certainly on that first goal, the way he just bullies defenders, and he's been doing it for years. But I feel like in the last sort of 12 months, maybe there's been another step forward. And again, This is me sort of admitting where I'm wrong a lot at the start of this podcast, because I said, I can't remember if it was on this show or if it was before this show actually started recording, but I was very much in the camp of thinking, yeah, he's really good, but is he the right man for Inter to replace Lukaku? And that was being discussed. And look, Inter found someone to replace Lukaku who's doing just fine, and didn't cost them as much of an upfront transfer fee. But the way Zapata's playing, yeah, he could have replaced Lukaku. He's so imposing and just completely threw Napoli's defence back by a few yards, basically to make that space to then lay the ball back for Malinovskyi. And you just think he's not just a brilliant footballer, but he's reached that point, I think, where he actually intimidates people a little bit. And I think that is like a tipping point for some centre forwards, some number nines, is when your opponent respects your game so much that they start overcompensating to try to deal with you. And I think he's at that point now, Zapata, where he's got a lot of defence in Serie A off their game. I will say, because I feel like you sort of threw it out there a bit lightly, Mina, Koulibaly is not like just a small miss. Koulibaly is probably, for me, one or two in Serie A defenders this season. I think he's been playing really well again, which there was a period when he wasn't. But still, this is not a ragtag group of misfits. Napoli have plenty of other defenders who play international football. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's because I think there's a lot of emphasis sometimes on the individual quality of centre backs. But for me, defending is such a team unit thing that if it's a player is, obviously like taking away Tomori from Milan has caused huge problems, but it should really be like a team effort. And putting him next to Rahmani has made such a difference because their partnership just works.
Absolutely.
Their characteristics so much complement one another. And having Anguissa and the ability to communicate as a unit has obviously also improved them. And taking away, two of those members resulted in how many goals conceded now for Napoli in the last two matches, So these things obviously do absolutely make a difference. But I just wanted to ask you if what you feel about now who might be in the top four.
But I feel like we probably should have if someone had paid attention to this, like a running chart of where we're putting everyone, because I bet it's zigzagging up and down as my knee is jerking furiously. Increasingly, you look at, and we haven't talked about them yet for this episode, but you look at how Inter are playing and you think, okay, that's coming together, right? So that's looking to me like the natural favourite for Serie A, given they are the reigning champions, given that they have already closed the gap down, or they're above Napoli now, 1 point within Milan, and they've got a deeper squad, as we talked about on the show. But do I think that the current top four is the most likely top four in some order? Yeah, probably. Juventus, the team that...
Oh, you think, yeah?
Juventus, the team that has the best chance to crack the group, for sure. And we'll talk about Juventus later and whether or not we think they're progressing or not. But, they have got some ground to make up. And right now, I have quite a lot of faith in Atalanta, who I previously thought were the weak link in the group. So if it's not going to be them, who's it going to be? So at this rate, it's going to be a very, very compelling season altogether, but it certainly has been so far.
This is why I think Italy should have 6 places for Champions League, but never mind.
Maybe someone should come up with a league that's special, a super league. Serie A Chronicles is excited to partner with Kaleido Media, an Australian digital media agency specializing in website design and development and digital marketing.
The Kaleido Media team has a diverse range of digital skills, including helping our podcast by managing its social media accounts and editing videos for YouTube.
Whether you're looking to enhance your website to attract new business or find an audience via social media marketing to generate leads and sales, Kalido Media will work with you to develop a customized digital strategy for your business.
They've had a lot of success in generating leads and driving online traffic for various types of businesses, including home builders, renovators, and kitchen cabinetry professionals, commercial cleaning, and even tennis coaches.
So if you're looking to attract new eyeballs to your business to generate leads and drive sales, visit kalidomedia.com.au to get in touch with the team to discuss a strategy to fire up your business, connect with your ideal audience, and communicate your message.
Fire up, connect, and communicate with Kalido Media. See the link in the show notes. Here's a snippet from our interview with Gianluca Busio from Venezia FC. The full episode will be dropping on Friday, so tune out for that. But just for now, listen to this.
Dischetto del rigore, la conclusione, la palla che viene deviata e finisce in rete. Il pareggio del Venezia con Busio al minuto numero 47.
I think for me, it was always going to be Italy. I think with my dad being Italian, and I just grew up watching the Serie A. Then the more I played in the MLS, the more and more interest was coming from Italy. So it was kind of just all written and perfect for me. So I felt that this was the right spot for me, and for Venezia and for me to come here is I talked to some other clubs in the Serie A, and when I talked to Venice, I had the feeling of a family pretty much. Even through calls, you could tell that they were a tight knit group, and everything was run more of a family aspect, and they were really just focused, and they seemed very interested in me as a person and a player. So for me, I felt most comfortable when I was talking to them, and I think that's what when I first moved to Kansas, that's what I was looking for. So kind of was looking for the same things, and Venice offered that the best.
Do you feel that in Italy, playing and in that role, are you forced into that a lot more? Obviously, is that something that you feel like, defense is so important to Italians, where you didn't feel like necessarily that you had more freedom elsewhere?
Yeah, 100%. I think, especially in our team, obviously we're not, the Milans or Napolis where we can, go out and, cruise through games sometimes. So we have to, the main part of our team is to defend. I think if you don't have that side of it, then you can't attack really. I think the attack starts with the defense. So you need players who, are going to want to defend, even if they're not great at it. It's about, the mentality of it. And I think that's what I'm learning now. It's not that you're a good 1v1 defender. If you're strong, if you're fast, it's, if you want to win the ball, if you want to defend, then, you can do it. So especially with Zanetti as our coach now, he's very, very big on that. He can say all the tactics in the world and come up with master plans. But if, there's not 11 guys on the field who would, put their body on the line to stop a goal, then, you're not going to play. And that's something that he's been very, very hard about. And, on the other side, on the offensive side, it's more about, creativity and be free. But, everybody has to defend first to get there.
Even within Europe, we hear a lot from English players or players from other countries who go to Italy that they can be surprised by how tactical the game is, by how much the focus is on specifics of tactics. Was that a shock at all for you coming to Italy? Is Zanetti like that, or did you find it more similar than you were expecting?
No, it's definitely what everybody says about it. It's a very tactical league. I think every game we have a different game plan. Every other game we'll have something new to try to exploit them and how we're going to defend them. And I like it a lot. I think I'm learning so much about the game from each game. I'm just learning a lot, different ways to break down teams, different ways to defend. And it's something that, I didn't really know much about. And obviously I watch a lot of games, and, in my free time, I'll watch Premier League, other Serie A games. So I'm learning a lot, but, the best way to learn for me is, really being out there and doing it.
I want to know what he thought of you going with the US national team. Was there ever any part of him that was like, hey, you could hold out and play for Italy? Was that ever a conversation, or was that not at all?
By the time I, got to even being in the question of making the Italian national team, I was kind of already on the US team. So, like I said, he's lived in America for most of his life now. So he's an American fan just as much as he is an Italian fan. But
I've got one other really important question about food, and it's very important just because I was, as I said, lived close to Kansas City, so I know this is a topic. Is it Joe's KC for you, or is it Gates BBQ? Which is the best?
It was the first barbecue I went to when I moved there, so kind of has a special place in my heart.
So that was just a little teaser from Gianluca Busio. If you do want to listen to the full interview that Nicky and I had with the wonderful Busio, then do listen in, because that episode will be dropping in on Friday instead of the Serie A Chronicles questions Q&A. So just for this week, we will have that special interview dropping on Friday, and it's half an hour, and we ask lots of questions from best and favorite food, favorite barbecue, to what's it like to being in Italy. So you definitely should tune in. And I guess we'll go back to regular recordings next week. Not sure anyone was applauding in the Stadio Olimpico when Roma lost 0-3 to Inter, who were just simply fantastic. When Simone Inzaghi was asked if this was their best performance actually of the season, he was reluctant to say so, because he thinks that they played well in other games as well, and they did. But my God, Inter for me are simply unstoppable, Nicky. I mean, the way that they're playing their football, I had to, despite the fact that I was in the middle of 1,000 things, I simply had to go on Twitter because of my feelings of Antonio Conte's tactics. And just to see the progression, and I'm sorry, but frankly, how much better they are to watch right now. And this is despite the fact that they had sold Romelu Lukaku, they sold Achraf Hakimi, they don't have Christian Eriksen, I mean, these are just, and this is despite even injuries as well. No De Vrij, no Damian, this was a spectacular performance, and the unpredictability and the patterns of play created and the individuals growing. Oh, Inzaghi is tremendous, and his football is tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, let's start here, because we're going to have to torch Jose Mourinho for his team's performance as well at some point, or at least I'm going to if you won't. But Inter are soaring at the moment, and I think it was such a sort of confident performance, regardless of where Roma are at, to go to the Stadio Olimpico, to an atmosphere where even when things were going badly for Roma, the crowd actually was still pretty impressive all the way through in terms of staying behind Roma, making it an atmosphere that was hot, shall we say. There was never a game. Even before Calhanoglu opened the scoring, and the first goal was a little bit chance. Initially, goals direct from a corner are called Olimpico, and this was an Olimpico at the Stadio Olimpico.
At the Olimpico.
Yeah, he swung the ball in towards the near post. He said afterwards, look, I always put the ball in towards the near post. He wasn't necessarily trying to score, but it went in. But the second goal Inter scored, Mina, was incredible. I mean, the Serie A posted it on their Twitter account with like a thing about a symphony, but it's 19 passes that Inter play. The last part of it in particular, where it's just one-touch football between, I think it's Perisic and Calhanoglu and Bastoni and maybe Correa on the edge of the box. There's one other anyway. All sort of just knit together so beautifully. And then Calhanoglu rolls the ball across to Edin Dzeko, and you think, that's the stuff. That's the stuff that you want to see. That's a real team coming together. And I think the real sort of celebration of Inzaghi ball as well at this point. I think there's been a sort of degree up till now when you can say, well, what's Conte, what's Inzaghi? And of course, there's going to be a bit of that all through the season, because look, you did inherit a team that won the league, but this was Inzaghi. And not only was it Inzaghi, but at the very heart of it, two players who weren't even there when Conte was there, right? Calhanoglu, who I had my doubts about fitting into that team at the beginning of the season, but who has been sensational for the last month. And Edin Dzeko finishing it off. That was one of the best team goals I've seen all season. And Inter are week to week, I feel like, again, I think I said it in the last segment, you could chart my reactions to these teams over the season. It's like they are soaring right now. What's the what's the thing everyone says about the cryptocurrencies when they're going, well, to the moon? Inter are going to the moon right now. That's how their trajectory is looking to me.
It's funny because when it comes to Inter, like they are, when a team is good, when you trust them in every big match and you feel safe that they will not only just be magnificent in the way that they play their football going forward, but you trust the back line even when there are absences there. I mean, obviously, this is a much better squad than what Roma have. And I understand that Jose Mourinho has been saying, well, what do you expect? It's already difficult to play against this Inter side that had finished so many more points ahead of us, let alone one where we are missing so many of our starters, from Tammy Abraham, who was obviously suspended, Pellegrini, who's injured, no Karsdorp. And yet this was it was such a ridiculous game, because it was almost like, yeah, well, what do you expect? I don't have anything. And then he brings on these, two youngsters in Bove and Volpato. And it's almost like he uses it as a way of either saying, I don't have a squad, so what do you expect? Because I don't have the players that I want. And another form of sort of complaints, if you like, or a case of this will detract from the fact that we had played so desperately and so badly. I mean, this is a squad that isn't complete and it has its absences. And yet I cannot understand, with everything that they've done, like you don't want to maybe try Mayoral, like you don't want to maybe, Villar is back, so perhaps put him in midfield. You don't want to literally give somebody else a go, or it's like you're so stuck on the players that you have right now, and this is what you're going with. And I just feel that there was no fight. It is so dependent on what Pellegrini can do. Shmurodov just seems like a ghost right now. And I think that Mkhitaryan, when he is up against it, he's not somebody that necessarily always makes the difference against the types of team that Inter is. But this is what I mean. You're playing in the Stadio Olimpico. You're being watched by the likes of Totti. There were so many incredible people who had come to the stadium. It was such an interesting atmosphere, obviously, because of the fact that Inzaghi was the Lazio coach, because of the fact that, Jose Mourinho was the treble-winning Inter coach. And yet you just feel like this is a project going forward and you were never going to get the players. Is this what we're going to expect if you don't have all your stars available? It was very, very disappointing from Roma.
Yeah, I mean, there was this phrase that got a lot of sort of traction afterwards from Mourinho about how his team's offensive potential was nulla, it was nothing. And I just... Don't tell me you've got no attacking options when literally last season's top scorer sat the entire 90 minutes on the bench without coming onto the pitch. Don't tell me you've got no attacking options when you've got Shmurodov, your team spent 20 million euros or so in the summer. Don't tell me you've got no attacking options when you've got Mkhitaryan on the pitch, who we, seen score goals before. When you've got Zaniolo, who's supposed to be one of the great coming hopes of Italian football. Don't tell me you've got nothing. You don't have to be as good as Inter right now. Nobody's expecting you to be as good as Inter. Inter are very much
far and away the
built
best
to fight for the league title, and Roma aren't. I don't think anyone would kill you for that. But what you do get killed for, and what you should get killed for, is being this meek in a game at home against Inter. They didn't just lose 3-0, Mina. They were 3-0 down at half-time, and there was no reaction after half-time. There was nothing. This is a weaker performance than Venezia gave against them. It's a weaker performance than Spezia gave against them. These are not teams that you can look at and say, oh, well, they had all the money. They had all the possibilities against Inter. Roma don't have to be as good as Inter right now, but they have to be better than this. I thought they were awful. I thought they were really, really dreadful. And it's really damning, I'm sorry, but it is, of Jose Mourinho that we are here in December. Because I was enthusiastic at the beginning when we got the goal at Sassuolo. We got Mourinho running down the sideline. We got those memories of Jose being Jose and it being fun. But this is a man who is taking the joint biggest salary in Serie A, who's currently got the team 8 points worse off than they were last season under Fonseca, 7 points worse off than they were in Fonseca's first season at the same point. What are you contributing? Because I don't feel like we can say now that it's no time and no money. You've been here long enough that we could at least see something. Whereas instead, what I feel like is you're heading literally in the wrong direction, away from where you were at the start of the season into something that's just completely disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. It's, we talk about maybe you don't have the talent that you dream of, right? And like you said, we're not expecting you to do or to play against Inter on equal terms, because we know where Inter are right now, and they are just a Scudetto winning team. So they are fabulous to watch. And for all my money, I think they could beat Real Madrid and win the group of the Champions League at the moment. But to be honest with you, it's also the stats. 20 tackles Inter put in to 9 from Roma. I mean, dispossessed 12 times, Roma. How many times were Inter dispossessed? 4. The whole point of Mourinho, if we are not expecting offensive patterns of play, that beautiful football, that one-touch passing that, is associated to your Pep Guardiolas, your Sarris, your Inzaghis now, yeah? Then you're supposed to provide the mentality, right? The grit, the determination, the warrior-like, the harmony, the everything that everyone said about it. It wasn't obvious there. It wasn't evident at all. And yes, there are absences, but you're like you said, there is Zaniolo on the pitch that Paulo Fonseca didn't have. There is Shmurodov that he didn't have. You're still playing with Mkhitaryan, Veretout, who is a very capable midfielder, one of the very best, honestly, in Serie A. You still have Cristante available. Mancini, Smalling, Kumbula. Like, how can this team be so defensively poor, lacking in mentality, without an offensive pattern of play that you can really think about? And frankly speaking, like, when you look at the way they are, this is in addition to what they did against Bologna, which was hideous to watch. For me, what annoyed me so much watching them against Torino is that Torino just gave them the ability to counterattack. They played such good football, but because they didn't leave Roma with having to figure it out offensively, they lost that match. But frankly speaking, I'm not in, like you're saying, they are 8 points off, 9 if you consider the fact that, they were punished last season and deducted points last season, Roma. Fonseca's team was much better, and I'm sorry it didn't have the money that was spent in there. So I don't, like you said, I don't see the value add that Jose Mourinho is bringing into this team. But I don't know whether to be like, wow, Inter are so amazing, or just really disappointed in what Jose Mourinho is doing from a mentality point of view and from an actual tactical point of view.
Yeah, look, it's a bit from pot A and a bit from pot B, I think, when it comes to where Inter great or where Roma are awful. I think it's both. It's so dispiriting that when Mourinho came to Roma, I think a lot of people who've followed his trajectory at Manchester United and Tottenham looked at him and went, this will go sour. And there was a countervailing sort of opinion in Italy of, no, this is still the great champion, and someone who's still remembered in Italy as the guy who won the treble at Inter. And I really felt like this occasion, the occasion of playing against Inter, the club where he did achieve so much, where he did do something unprecedented, where he is still loved. I mean, there was banners for him in the Inter section before kickoff. You feel like these were the occasions that used to get the good Mourinho, right? Like the big stage was always his stage. He was always the one who would impose himself and come up with something brilliant when all the cameras were on him and he knew he could put on a show. Whereas instead, the lasting sort of walk away of Mourinho from this game is the press conference afterwards, where he gets asked why his team is so passive. That thing about the tackles that you mentioned, Mina. And instead of answering it, he comes back by telling the journalist, well, it's much easier to do your job than my job. And that's why I get paid much more. And yeah, I mean, yes, Jose, I don't disagree with you. Your job is harder than my job. You are paid much better than me, but you're also paid much better than 18 out of 20 Serie A managers. So that's who you're being compared against, not me. I'm not your sort of competition here. It wasn't my question, but I'm speaking on behalf of journalists. Your competition is other football managers. And I just look at this Roma team and I think, do I think they would be... Here's a question, I guess, that we could put it in really blunt terms. Would you feel more or less optimistic about this team, do you think, if Fonseca was still in charge?
Much more optimistic. Much more, because I could see a project.
And that's it, isn't it?
That's it. It's the project. It's the development of players. I mean, look, they actually, like, Reynolds was the player that, for example, that Juventus was scouting, and you have him at Roma. Borja Mayoral was scoring tons of goals last season under Fonseca. Dzeko wasn't always available for them at the time. So when people keep referring to his absence, I mean, Roma, he had even talked about the fact that Roma had tried to sell him so many times. You've got Villar, who's got velvety feet. Every time anyone talks about him, it's about his touch on the ball, his intellect on the ball. Yes, maybe he is not your tough, sort of Mourinho type warrior player, but he is beautiful to watch. Why is he not being given a chance? Why is the team? I mean, you bring on Volpato and Bova. It's almost like you're just trying to just use different ones or detract from what you're doing. But Darbo, what about Darbo that Fonseca had given a chance to? Again, these are all the available players where you saw a genuine plan and you could keep mixing and matching them with Fonseca, and you trusted the players kept developing, the game kept developing, there was tactical versatility, there were ideas going forward. Yes, at times they lacked the mentality. Yes, they didn't win their big matches. But now it's not a case of just not winning the matches. I don't really see, frankly, anything. And I don't see the patterns of play upset me, because through tactics, players can improve on an individual level. And right now, I don't look at any of those players and think, yes, they've taken a big step forward from they were last year. And I worry for that, especially because they do have Pellegrini and Zaniolo and Cristante, who represent the national team. And I need these players to keep developing on an individual level within tactics that make sense for them. And that is what worries me about this. They are a team that do very well when they counterattack, but really offensively, they are very dependent on Pellegrini and potentially some of the vertical movements of Zaniolo. And when those two aren't available, I don't see much there, to be honest with you.
God, that might be my biggest rant of the season on this show so far. It's so tremendously disappointing to me. It's so disappointing because I think they could be better. And again, it's not about expecting them to be at Inter's level. It's not, but to be this sort of insipid, to be this without any sort of character in a big game like this, I find really an indictment of where they're at right now. And look, Jose is not going anywhere in the next 5 minutes, I'm certain, because of that salary he's been hired on, and maybe he'll turn it around and force us to eat some humble pie, but it just really doesn't feel at the moment like it's going in a good direction at all. And it's a shame. It's a real shame.
I do want to say on a positive note, just from what you're seeing from Inter, and this is largely because I sort of, a lot was said at the time about the sales that they had made, obviously, and it seemed like this was going to be a transitional year because they'd lost, obviously, like two big stars, and then Eriksen and his injury added to that, and obviously Antonio Conte walking out. Do you see that? Do you watch this team and think, I can understand maybe missing Achraf Hakimi, right? Even though I think Darmian's been wonderful, and Dumfries finally got a goal and was so happy.
Yeah, it's good game for Dumfries.
Dzeko's just been tremendous. Çalhanoğlu, that I was so unimpressed with for so many games, ever since he played Milan in the derby, I feel like he's just been tremendous from every point of view, technical, tactical, his chemistry, like his understanding. Wow. Yeah. I don't know whether that was just the push that he needed, but do you miss Christian Eriksen? Do you miss Romelu Lukaku? Do you miss Antonio Conte?
No, the team is playing really good football right now. I think I talked about this before with Spalletti and Napoli. And I think that even in the final analysis this season, even at the end of the season, maybe even in 2 seasons' time, whatever Inzaghi is doing, will have some Antonio Conte in it inevitably, right? Because you always take, as a manager, some of what came before and you build on it. You are always sort of, unless you're literally selling the whole squad, you're always taking something and building on it. But I think that this is one of those games you looked at and thought, no, this is now clearly something that has taken another step, that is going in its own direction, that isn't just standing on the shoulders of the people who were there before and trying to imitate it. And that's a really encouraging step. And I'm looking at this Inter team as we're recording right now. They're about to head into a big game in the Champions League against Real Madrid. Of course, they were unlucky to lose at home to Real Madrid. And I just think, gosh, this team is in a position that it hasn't been in for a few years, moving confidently into the Champions League knockout stage, and it's in the title race at the same time. This is a club that counter to Roma's trajectory is just moving in such a positive direction. And I think that's astonishing when we think, certainly again, keep throwing throwing water at past Nicky this episode. Contrary to what I expected at the start of the season, I did not think that this team would be able to keep moving forward, having lost those two players. And that's exactly what it's done. Even though some players like Dumfries, I think still hasn't got to where he's going to get to yet. So they've managed to do it even while some of those players are still working things out. I do want to highlight one player who is not new, but who I don't talk about enough, and I think doesn't get talked about enough in general. I just think Brozovic is wonderful. I think Brozovic is his whole last year has been not appreciated enough internationally, and that relationship that he's building now with Çalhanoğlu, it's like the idea that was had with Eriksen and Brozovic, but it's better. It's going in an even better direction. I think that's really, really important.
Well, I mean, when you have a better coach, right? It's just normal that your players do better. I'm sorry, I just had to get that in. It's interesting because, like you said, it is a step forward from the difference and obviously the way they play. One team that perhaps hasn't taken that step forward is Juventus, even though Pirlo was, the novice and new to the sport. There were some great moments for Juventus last season under Pirlo, and you sort of sometimes saw what it is that he was trying to do, not that he always pulled it off. They obviously managed to scrape in fourth place. Allegri came in. You and I both thought that they would do a lot better, and they obviously haven't done a lot better. But they managed to beat Genoa. It was a very, very tough. Way tougher than it needed to be. And if there was ever a game that really showed you that they need to buy a centre forward, this was definitely it. The way that they struggled to score a goal is something that's just terrible. But here's the thing, it's always two steps forward for Juventus, where you see some things, like against Lazio, players playing in their rightful roles, Rabiot not shoved to play on the wing. And you think, okay, this is a great step forward. And then they'll play Chelsea and it'll be an abomination of a match. And then once again against Genoa, you see, okay, that they're trying to win the ball back higher. There's a lot more energy there. And now I'm worried about obviously everything going forward. But they do have some easier games coming up. What do you think about this Juventus side?
My first thought is how exciting, and how excited I'm sure you were that Paulo Dybala got MVP for last month in Serie A. I saw that award giving out before kickoff, and I thought Mina will be in full accordance with this decision to give him that award. But actually, he played well. He played well in this game. And I agree with your analysis of this game. I didn't probably have the same sense of building anxiety that I can imagine you might have as a Juventina, because I didn't have the same investment in the result. But 27 shots it took them before they, I think, but when it wasn't the last one, but they took 27 shots, scored twice. The 1-0.
12 on target, yeah.
Right. And when you think as well that the first of those goals was in fact just a corner, so it wasn't even a shot that they scored from the first time. So it was like Çalhanoğlu's a corner that went directly in for Cuadrado. It's such an extraordinary scene, just watching them piling onto, let's be frank, a bad Genoa team who are not in a good place right now. And poor Shevchenko, it should be said, with the best one in the world, has been thrown into a hideous run of games as he starts this sort of journey.
He really has, by the way. It's horrible.
Horrible fixture list. But yeah, Genoa are bad. And yet Juventus took a very long time to kill them off, which was, I suppose quite a fraud situation. But you can look at it the other way as well, which is say, I thought Juventus were just far and away the best team on the pitch. And there haven't been that many games this season for which we could say that.
Yeah, that's one thing that you can say. It's annoying because when you see them actually battling to win the ball high up, it's so hard to determine anything because, at the end of the day, it is Genoa, right? And it's like you said, this is a team that didn't even have Rovella in the side. On top of the fact this is a horrible fixture list, they are missing practically all their players. If Roma are crying, then and Napoli, then Genoa really, Shevchenko was saying he didn't even know how to find 11 players to put on the pitch. It was that difficult, They just couldn't win back the ball. They couldn't even have a shot. Nothing. There was just nothing that was working for them. There was more to them against Milan, certainly. At least they had Rovella than they managed against Juventus. And, Dybala did wonderfully against Salernitana and Genoa. Read what I'm saying there, against Salernitana and Genoa. That's so mean. Dybala is a great player.
MVP of the month.
That's the problem. Yeah, I mean, he is a very good player. And there's no denying that. I mean, the way that his talent is on the ball, Juventus are effectively dependent on what he can do on the ball going forward. The issues, of course, lie in the fact that the way that he plays the game doesn't necessarily suit the rest of those around him. Yeah, but that's not his fault. The other obviously big problem that we have is his availability. He is constantly injured. You're always worried when he's going down. And that has always been a reason why I don't think he's ever managed to maintain that momentum to really like kick on and reach the levels that everyone thinks that he is capable of. Because we know he's talented. We know he's wicked feet. You know, we know that his intelligence on the ball is unrivaled at times, but it's just having him available all the time is tough to find. And Morat is a second striker. He's not a forward that you need in this team. There needs to be a point of reference, a man up top that they play off. And Kulusevski, I don't know whether he's cutting it at Juventus. I feel like he needs a lot of space. And I don't think that he's always going to be afforded the kind of space that he's looking for. I don't know how well he works. And this is a team that obviously doesn't have Chiesa at the moment. But going forward, it's a team that worries me, frankly speaking. And like you said, when you see the top four and just how good the football is that is being produced from Napoli and Milan and Atalanta and, of course, Inter, then there's just no space really for Juve. And they don't really deserve it right now, not considering how much they had to sweat against lowly Genoa. What about Milan, though? What do you think of... they obviously had been suffering a little bit against Sassuolo and managed to win over Salernitana, but lost captain Cagliari. Coming up against Liverpool.
Yeah, so Cagliari was injured in the midweek game, I think, against Genoa. And I think that Milan, like Juventus, probably very grateful to get a game, or in their case, a couple of games, which were just a bit easy. You know,
yes.
There are certain teams in Serie A right now that are really struggling. Genoa are one of them, Salernitana are another one of them, and Cagliari are another one of them. Now, to throw back for a second, Inter have two of those teams to play in their next 3 games before the winter break. So Inter have got a very nice little pre-Christmas run-up coming in. But yeah, look, Milan kind of needed this, I think. And it's a handy thing to have going into another do or die game in the Champions League. Of course, they're playing Liverpool. Their fate is out of their hands. They need the result between Porto and Atletico to go their way as well. I don't know what to say about these games because I can't read too much into them because I really think without being sort of mundane in what I'm saying, these teams are really struggling a lot. And the quality gap between what's happening at the top of Serie A and the bottom of Serie A is particularly wide right now, it feels like. But, you know, it feels good to win. It feels good to win even after losing which is certainly a huge setback for them defensively. And I think it's a real shame because this team was playing so well with Payet and Tomori there together at the start of the season, but at least Tomori is back now. It's nice to see Salamaca's scoring and getting into a groove. But I'm not going to sort of look at this game or indeed the midweek game and say, you know, Milan are back or some sort of comment like that. I don't equally want to say Milan never went away just because they had a couple of bad results. They're top of the league right now. But I just don't think these are games that you can look at and go, oh, here's a big sweeping conclusion.
No, I agree with you there because it is difficult to do that. And obviously, like you said, they are so vastly inferior to anything that Milan will produce. I mean, most of the time it looked like Pioli was experimenting and he even gave Pellegrini a chance to play against Genoa, but obviously the player went off injured, sadly. And he's having problems a lot with trying to just be available to play a few string of games.
Well, I was saying this to you before we started, Mina, but I feel like the injuries everywhere are really like a lot right now. And you know, this is a separate point, but I really am struggling with why we've congested this front part of the Serie A season so much. I'd have to go back and look, but I do not remember many, if any, years recently where we've got 19 games, half the season done before Christmas. And that's where we're going to be by the time we get to Christmas this year. And I don't know why but it feels like the games are coming too fast right now. And really, if you look at the top of the table, and especially the top because they've got Europe as well, but even all the way down the table, the injury lists right now seem really brutal.
Yeah, and the injuries is what really could make the difference, because if Napoli have to make do with that Osimhen, and let's say another injury to Koulibaly if he comes back, they are reliant on a lot of these players. Obviously, Africa Cup of Nations come into play as well. Milan, again, they'll lose that in the Cup of Nations, Kessié and Benacer. They do suffer a lot of injuries as well. And on top of it, so many teams are involved now as well in Europe, not just in the Champions League or Europa League, but there's the Europa Conference League. And then there's obviously Coppa Italia coming up as well. So that's even more games for everyone to take charge of. So this is why it's almost like difficult, because Inter have the squad depth. I do think that is one thing that I always trust with Conte, is that he leaves behind a great fitness sort of regime. And when people take over, and Inzaghi has been good at that as well, in maintaining that. They had Antonio Pintus last season, which put them in great conditioning, especially towards the latter half of the season, which is what he works on. They don't have him this season, but they've seemingly continued that. They do obviously have injuries, but they have great replacements for those injuries in a way that Milan don't, or Napoli may not. And frankly, I'm not even sure that Juve do. If they lose Locatelli, I shudder to think, what will happen, for example. So is that what we're talking about now? Is that going to be a case of, Atalanta look like the only team where it doesn't matter if they lose half the team, they'll just, honestly, they could just pick people off the road and they'll win. I don't know how they manage these things. Honestly, it doesn't even seem like they need their starters. So is that what it's going to depend on in the end? Who loses less?
I think it's going to be a factor. I mean, funnily enough, Atalanta had a worse injury situation a few weeks ago, and they're not all the way back, but they're starting to get healthier again. But yes, it's going to have a big impact. We were talking with Napoli about the impact of the Cup of Nations. It certainly applied to Milan as well. It applies to lots of clubs in different degrees. But Napoli have effectively had the players they were going to lose the Cup of Nations taken away from them even sooner. And these things are inevitably going to have an impact on how things shake out. And to a degree, that's completely normal, right? Like in every football season forever, there have been injuries, and some of those injuries have been more important than others. And it's part of professional sport, not just football. But it does feel to me like this is, again, I'm throwing this out there without having done any proper research, Mina, and brought numbers, but it feels to me like the injuries are just a lot right now, more than usual.
Yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, it looks like, the run for 6th, 7th, 8th. I mean, there are so many good teams, but Fiorentina finally managed to get like a rare away victory, which is something to rave about. Vlahovic, do you think that he's getting closer to potentially staying, or do you think these are pipe dreams?
It depends what you mean by staying. I think it's never, in my mind, been off the table that he could stay this season.
Okay.
I don't think he'll stay past next summer. I think it was my expectation still that he would leave in January. And I suppose it depends in the end who's willing to dig into their pockets and put the money up. I know Juventus would love to have him, but do Juventus have the money right now, especially with an investigation ongoing, to make that happen? And if it's not Juventus, then who will it be? Is there a Premier League club that would do it? I mean, look, if Antonio Conte were to say, I want him at Tottenham, and Daniel Levy were to say, all right, I'm willing to throw all my money behind it, I don't think Fiorentina would have the financial might to say no to that if the player wanted to go as well.
Do you think the player would choose to go to Spurs?
I just don't know. I just don't know is the answer. My impression is that he's wanted to stay in Italy, that I think the Juventus move appeals to him. But
Manchester City are now in the game.
Yeah, and these situations are always fluid. I had pretty good confidence based on people I was talking to that Lukaku really didn't want to leave Inter this summer, and then it changed. Something changed his mind. That happens. Everyone's human, and a particular offer or a particular conversation could change his mind. But certainly my impression up to now has been that Vlahovic would prefer to stay in Italy. For now, not necessarily forever.
I don't mind if obviously, I understand that every player has his own ambitions and things. The only reason why Vlahovic for me is a talent that, will one day compare with one of the very best, or at least that's based on what we've seen so far. Maybe, will come to fruition, maybe it won't. But if he is trying to prove that he belongs with those kids that you should look out for, then he needs to be playing in the biggest stage. And the likes of Tottenham and Arsenal, who have been following him, just aren't on that level yet. I mean, obviously, there's every reason to believe they could be. But if I'm him and I'm saying to myself, I'm going to leave this wonderful setup in Fiorentina where I really like the coach, they're trying to make me their richest star ever, then I'm only going to leave it if I can go somewhere that I'm going to definitely grow and I'm going to definitely be seen and have visibility and play all the time, or as much as I can, at least, for a team in which I can learn from. So unless it's staying with Italy and going to a much bigger club, your Juves, your Inters, or who are playing in the Champions League, not for any other reason, or go somewhere like a Manchester City, again, Pep Guardiola, playing in the Champions League, winning titles. For me, I feel like those are the only two that make sense. Like, as in that sense, I don't understand if you're just going to go and just have lots of money from Daniel Levy or something like that. But obviously that's his decision, and you're right. Sometimes they do make decisions based on maybe he'll like Antonio Conte, So we don't know which way it's going to go. But what about Spezia Sassuolo? What did you think of that match?
Well, unlike you, Mina, I was watching the Venezia Verona game at the time, which was bonkers. We talked about that with Gianluca during our interview. And look, that game was absolutely enthralling for a team going from 3-0 up to losing 4-3. Spezia Sassuolo, I did not get to watch live, but is in keeping with this wild season we're having, and certainly a wild weekend. That was another comeback, wasn't it? They were 2-0 down Sassuolo, and having spent the last week raving to everyone about Gianluca Scamacca, now we get to rave about Raspadori instead, the new future of the Italian national team.
Dionisi, though, it's weird how Sassuolo are a team that scared Napoli, that terrified Milan, and then they come up against Spezia and they're 2-0 down, and you're thinking, wait, what what's going on here? I mean, you have to have, obviously they like playing against the big teams. They have more space to play their game. And that's what's become really interesting. But I think there's a part of us that's all sort of, supporting Sassuolo because of the fact that they've got Berardi, Raspadori and Scamacca. And I wonder whether that should be the starting, trio up front for, if they do really well, obviously, for Italy, just because we can bank on their chemistry, right?
I don't know if I'm ready to go all the way there, but it's definitely an Italian talent factory right now. And I definitely think it's not to mutare. It's not to toss out the idea that some of those mechanisms, some of those relationships are worth trying to carry over. I think for me in particular, it's still the idea of Berardi and Scamacca, just because I think Scamacca's height is so different to anything else that Italy have right now that I find that a really sort of compelling idea, at least as a plan B, even if it's not plan A. But look, if Raspadori keeps scoring, then absolutely he's in the conversation as well. He's already played for Italy.
And lastly, before we wrap up, I think that it's nice that Lazio managed to shock us again. I have no idea what to think of this team, at least on a defensive level. They are the most unusual team, I think, that I've ever watched this season, and I can't quite figure out who they are, what they're doing, and if they know what they're doing. I will never stop laughing at that gif that Nima put up for them against Napoli. And then it was obviously a roller coaster ride against Udinese with 8 goals in a match.
4-4 on Thursday, if anyone missed it.
Just where do you think they'll land? Or how long is it going to take us to figure this out?
I have no idea, Mina. I'm giving up on trying to work this team out. Do you know what? If you've listened this far into the podcast, you're probably already on board. But Serie A is a ride this season. It is an absolute ride. Every week we get some just crazy things happening, whether it's, again, Venezia 3-0 up to losing 4-3, whether it's Lazio drawing 4-4 with Udinese and then bumping Sampdoria. I know the final score was 3-1, but they were 3-0 up and really in charge of that game. Whether it's Atalanta, Napoli, it just feels like every round of games, which, as I've said, are coming even for me, maybe a tiny bit too thick and fast at the moment. I wish they'd spread them out more than 3 days at a time. But every round of games is just wild. And it's certainly been a really, really fun first half of the season, I think.
Yeah, it's been tremendous. And it's been great covering it. But I think that's probably all we have time for this week.
Yes, it has been such fun covering it with you, Mina. I'm just enduringly delighted that we got this podcast back together.
Me too.
We are back on Friday with not our Chronicles Q&A this week, with the rest of our interview with Gianluca Busio, which I am certain you guys are going to enjoy. Honestly, he was a real treat to chat to, so I hope you guys do enjoy it. But we will be back with a Q&A next week, so please do get your questions in on Twitter at Serie A Chron Pod with the hashtag Chronicles Q&A. Find us on Twitter at Mina Rzouki, at Nicky Bandini. Subscribe to the Serie A Chronicles YouTube channel for clips of the show. And if you watch a clip, do hit that like and subscribe button. It all helps us out. Leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. As Mina always said, make it a good one, or wherever you get your podcast. And Mina, I guess I'll see you. Well, I've already seen you for the Busio interview, so I'll see you same time next week.
I can't wait.
See you later, gang.
Ciao for now.
Pulled away towards the penalty spot. Coming up on this side, Antonio Cabrini from left back. Chipping it in, and a possibility for... Oh, Rossi! Rossi's got it! Paolo Rossi has done it! 1-0 to Italy, after only 5 minutes. Cerezo. Oh, Rossi! And Rossi's it again! 2-1! Paolo Rossi! Terrible mistake by Cerezo. The Gomi is up there, shot by Tardelli, and it's been turned in! Paolo Rossi was there again! Unbelievable! It's 3-2 to Italy! Would you believe it? And I don't think there's been a World Cup match like this.
Fallo di Rummenigge, su Oriali, battuta la punizione, cross di Gentile, gol! Ha segnato Rossi, gol di Rossi al 12° del secondo tempo. Stiliche, Litbarski, ferma Scirea, Bergomi, Gentile ha finito, campioni del mondo, campioni del mondo, campioni del mondo. L'Italia ha vinto la finale battendo la Germania per 3-1. Insieme con il Brasile è 3 volte campione del mondo.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
It's time to take your body care routine to the next level. Introducing Osea's bestseller body care set, the perfect companion for your summer travels. This 4-piece kit transforms dry skin to silky, soft, and glowing. It features travel sizes of Osea's best-selling Undaria algae body oil and body butter, clinically proven to improve skin elasticity, along with their anti-aging body balm and salts of the earth body scrub. And to top it off, it's packed in a vegan leather bag, making it a must-have for all your summer adventures. Everything Osea makes is clean, vegan, cruelty-free, and climate-neutral, so you never have to choose between your values and your best skin. Treat yourself to glowing, healthy skin this summer with clean, vegan skincare and body care from Osea. Right now, you can get the bestsellers body care set valued at $78 for 33% off. Use code SUMMER to save an additional 10%. That's an additional 10% off at OseaMalibu.com, code SUMMER.